Attention audience. No Supreme Court justices were harmed during the production of this podcast.
True crime.
Sex.
Political conspiracy.
Celebrity gossip.
Murder.
UFOs.
Crooked officials.
The occult.
Assassination.
Courtroom drama. Rape.
Corporate scams.
Scandal Sheets. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Scandal Sheet. My name is Thad Helsley, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Anurada. Anurada, how's it going in the dead of winter?
Hello, Thad. Well, it's a little confusing because I've been watching that the snow is literally going to become like 18 or 20 inches. Some people are going to get like 10 feet. So
This weekend, you mean? Coming
It's
up?
very interesting. Yeah, it's like, what the heck? How did that
Yeah.
even happen? So it's going to be
Well-
wild.
Yeah.
Good times we're living in.
But, you know, what's going to warm us up, Anurada, is because we're very excited today. This is our fourth Supreme Court review episode, and it's for the 25-26 term, still in progress, partial term. And, of course, just about every case that goes into or comes out of the building on First Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., turns out to be a scandal. So to help us out, we are pleased to welcome back a frequent guest of this pod, New York City's multi-year super lawyer, David Grover from the firm of Grover and Fenster Stock. Welcome back to the pod, David.
Be here. So great to see you both from beautiful but very, very cold New York City today. A little 5-degree weather, but
5 degree. Woo.
yesterday was like, today might be a little better with the wind chill, but it is brutal out there. But
That's what comes from living on the ocean. Is that the deal? You know?
up here.
Yeah. Okay. So you're next on your honor.
Oh, well, David, you have been named a New York super lawyer 5 consecutive years. Is that true?
It is true. Very honored that my clients are happy and my colleagues respect me that way. It's wild. It's a wild out here practicing law, practicing a lot of personal injury in New York City. So to get any kind of recognition like that, especially for my clients, it's just a really, really nice honor to have.
So the clients vote on you, the actual people, the citizens vote for you.
That's awesome.
Well, for this particular thing, the clients, I guess, spread the word, but really it's my colleagues who see what we do and they nominate it. They do.
Oh, it's a peer group thing like the Oscars or something?
Kind of. They nominate us, and then the organization does their own evaluation, and that's how they come up with it. So, yeah, it is really a nice, just such an honor to have that. Definitely humbling as someone who.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, what do you get? Like an award? Do you get like a fancy dinner? Like,
Pretty much, that's it. And sometimes they give you a box of wine or something like that. But it's kind of, send you a few bottles of good wine. That's about it. But
So
it's still.
It's like when the Grinch That Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey came in and says, somebody said something about a check. A large check.
It comes down to. So that's what matters to us.
Okay.
That's so cool. How come you don't nominate me for anything, Thad?
I am nominating you for Best Actress in a Podcast. I'm just trying to figure out which one. See, and they're all like $500 to get into, but I will nominate you. Don't worry.
There's so many options.
Yep. So, I always like to mention this when you join us to talk about constitutional law, because, when some of our listeners hear that you're from New York City, they will quip that, oh, just another crazy New York liberal. But when they hear you, they are surprised, pleasantly surprised that you are a very fair and balanced person.
I think to be a good attorney, you really have to see both sides of every case to really do your job as an advocate. So that, to me, that's such an important attribute to have. And I think also, and I think we mentioned this years ago when we first spoke about it, I never forget when I was in law school. And what you do in law school is you read cases. You read them, then you read the dissent. So what I noticed is you read the majority opinion, you say, yeah, that's right. Totally makes sense. They're correct. Then you read the dissent. You go, that's true too. That's a good point. So I think you really have to really grasp a case. You really have to see both sides to it, or else you're not really doing your job.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sort of ambushing you because I didn't put this in the rundown. I just thought of it. But recently, there was a movie that's probably going to win a lot of Academy Awards with Russell Crowe called Nuremberg, which is about the Nuremberg trials after World War II. And, they were trying to make it as fair as, at least, picture-wise, as fair as possible. So all the Nazi generals had attorneys, who got to advocate for them, got to argue a case. Would you have taken that case? A lot of those guys were Jewish too.
Oh boy, I don't know.
You draw a line somewhere, huh?
Never wanted to work in criminal law. That was the exact reason. I did not want to
defend guilty people, right?
I understand the Constitution. I understand that alleged accused criminals should have great representation. It's really important to have that. So I completely respect it, but I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to get involved in something like that. I wanted to get involved with more what I do, which is personal injury. I deal with insurance companies, I deal with clients. I help them. I never wanted to do something that I go home with and I couldn't sleep at night because there's something.
Yeah.
Right, so, because everybody you represent is a victim of something, right? I mean, they're the good guys.
Or they did it.
It's a civil victim. And I remember years ago when I first started out, one of my friends was a criminal defense attorney. And what happens was she used to share emails and texts with people after they got someone acquitted. Mm-hmm. Hey, congratulations, great job, great job. And I said, wow, they're celebrating essentially a criminal getting off.
Yeah.
And then the guy goes out and kills somebody, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would bother. Look, again, there are innocent people out there that need representation.
Right.
Need to be acquitted. So, I get that. So it was too, didn't want to get involved. It was just too much. I want to be able to sleep at night. And by the way, that goes even as a prosecutor. Because even as a prosecutor, I worked in DA's office in the summertime. As a prosecutor, you're also sometimes putting people away who, you're not so sure should be going away.
Yeah.
That too. And you're like, well, I don't know. They had a rough life. They didn't do anything so terrible. So, it goes both ways. So that's why criminal law, I never wanted to get involved in. Nuremberg, yes, especially, I would never.
Yeah, it's a little extreme. That was unfair. I guess that was unfair. But
so David's not going to be Diddy's lawyer anytime soon. Let's just say that.
Or that Rob Reiner's son either. So I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And of course, no episode would be complete without our artificial intelligence engine, Bernice.
Hello everyone. I'm really happy you're not covering any AI cases today. And NVIDIA chips like myself don't compete in men's or women's collegiate sports.
Anurata and David, since the 2021 term, the Supreme Court has gained a solid 6-3 conservative majority, and it's been a very different sort of legal ball game than the previous last several decades of rulings, where conservatives may have had a minor majority, but there were swing guys and blah blah blah. I mean, David, how would you characterize the behavior of the Supreme Court over the last 5 years?
Well, I think we're seeing certainly it's a very conservative court,
right?
However, what we're also seeing are independent, somewhat conservative / moderate justices like Barrett, like Kavanaugh, and like Chief Justice Roberts, who really are not automatically one side or the other. I do think they are conservative, but they do look at each case independently. And I really believe that those three justices care about how they're looked at in history. I mean, they really look at these things. They know they're going to be judged. They care about their legacy. So yes, it is a conservative court that's going to rule by conservative values most of the time. But those three justices, they're somewhat wild cards, and you just don't know how they're going to go on certain cases. And because you have the more liberal bloc of those three, right? You have the conservative bloc, that those three become very powerful. They're the swing votes in almost every single case. So really, we almost have a Supreme Court of three in a way, because they almost decide, not every case, but a lot of cases, these three really decide where it's going to be decided because they're the swing votes.
So that's so ironic, isn't it? Because when Roberts first came on, first as Associate Justice and then very quickly as the Chief Justice, he was considered to be one of the most conservative guys. I mean, Scalia was maybe more to his right. He was considered to be very conservative and certainly not a swing voter, right? That was the female judge that blanking on her name. You know who I'm talking about, from Arizona. The one that had to retire because of her husband and Alzheimer's.
With an S. It's my mind too. Yes. So he is, but that's happened in history a number of times. Like there's been some very, if I'm not mistaken, Earl Warren, who was a very activist judge to the left, he was nominated by a conservative Republican president, if I remember correctly. So sometimes you nominate somebody, you don't really know what they're going to do. I would suspect that the President Trump is not completely happy with his nominations of both Kavanaugh and Barrett. While they are conservative, they're not hardcore conservatives. Like I think he kind of
voted with the liberals a few times,
a number of times.
Yeah.
And against him a number of times.
Well, yeah. I mean, there were like when, the cases about the 2020 election, almost unanimously, the Supreme Court twice voted against Trump because he didn't have any evidence.
There's been a lot.
There's been a lot. Okay.
A good number of cases decided with Roberts and sometimes Kavanaugh, sometimes Barrett, who don't necessarily take the current administrative's line on these decisions. And it happens a lot. And I mean, it's healthy. It's healthy to have people who are independent minded. We all have our viewpoints, but it's good to see that for the most part, they try to stick by the law, stick by the cases, and really care about their legacy one day, what people will say about them. And I think that's important. Without that, there wouldn't be a lot of debate on these cases.
And I think it's important to remind everybody, a Supreme Court appointment is a lifelong appointment if you want it, right? I mean, you can retire if you feel like it, but otherwise, once you're in, it's awfully, awfully difficult to get you out unless you've done something absolutely criminal.
It almost never happened. I think one time in history, possibly.
Well, one time in history. You're right. Yeah.
It never happened. Once you're there forever. And that's why these nominations are really important.
Yeah.
So, you can't get around it. Once you're there forever, and you have a lot of power. I mean, as we see, and as we have these pods, the Supreme Court really makes these dramatic decisions that do affect our lives every day.
Right. I mean, it's almost in some cases, obviously they have a very sort of a narrow lane, but I mean, my God, I mean, the overthrowing of Roe versus Wade. I mean, that's just, affects tens of millions of people, women, especially.
More than that. Yeah. So they do and like I said, the 2020 election decisions. So there are so many decisions that come down that what they do is really more, you could argue, is more important than a member of Congress and maybe potentially a president almost. They have so much power. And unlike a president or unlike Congress, they don't face the voters. So they can do whatever they want and there's no one to really answer to.
Right.
So that's, their authority is really, there's nothing quite like it in our government.
Right. There isn't. Anurata, do you have an opinion on this?
Well, I mean, so the court only heard 65 cases, right, in the 24-25 term. And they've only agreed to 55 cases in this year so far, right?
Yep.
But our listeners don't want to be here all week. So we decided to narrow it down to 2, and our friend David actually chose them. So let's get into it. Bernice, what is our first case and what is it all about?
Learning Resources versus Trump. Beginning in early 2025, a series of executive orders from President Donald J. Trump, invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, imposed unprecedented tariffs on imports, including goods from China. These included a 20% trafficking tariff and additional reciprocal tariffs that pushed rates on Chinese goods to over 145%. Petitioners' imports were directly affected, and complying with the new tariffs would increase their import-related costs from $2.3 million in 2024 to over $100 million in 2025, putting their businesses at existential risk. Decision pending. No consensus on upcoming ruling.
So yeah, so this case is, not only is it a fascinating case, but like we just said, certain cases affect our lives. This case really does affect our life, not only because, how this is decided in terms of tariffs and how it could change our economy drastically, but it also really answers a lot of questions regarding the power of the presidency.
Mhm.
Why this case is absolutely fascinating, and when it comes down, we're going to have a lot to talk about. So what it really comes down to is, if you follow the news at all, which most people do, President Trump has been issuing essentially executive orders, issuing tariffs on various countries around the world. Some of them initially were more for fentanyl, drugs. Certain countries weren't finding drugs enough, and that was part of the basis for it. The other ones were more either because he said the trade deficit is an issue, or he's also done it for retaliation. He's done it to try to get something from other countries. Kind of a tool of foreign policy is what it was being used.
Well, wasn't he trying to incentivize American companies to bring their factory operations back to the United States and not be located in foreign? Wasn't that part of it too? Bringing jobs back to the U.S.
Part of it too.
Okay.
Which I guess that's also related somewhat to the trade deficit.
Right.
So yeah, but and that was kind of part of it too. And this is really something that has never been done before. Nixon did something years ago, 10% for a limited period of time. It went through the courts, but nothing quite like this.
Not at this scale. I mean, even Barack Obama and George Bush II dabbled in it a little bit. And then when they saw inflation go through the roof, they said, "Oh," and they backed off and they ran away. But at this scale, nobody's tried it at this scale, not since World War II, at least, right?
Not like it. And it really comes down to the Constitution, right? Article 1, Congress is the branch that could lay taxes. They're the ones who initiate revenue bills. The House of Representatives has to be the one who actually started. So that's the Constitution. Bam, right? How is he doing this? Well, there's something called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Okay? He's utilizing this act, came in 1977.
1977?
1977. Yeah. And the president broad powers to do things, to declare an emergency, and to do broad things.
So it's got to be an emergency.
Has to be an emergency.
Okay.
It gives the president different things they could do, but what they're using is one provision, which is the president can regulate imports. Right?
By himself without Congress?
Well, kind of. Well, yes. Well,
within the context of the act, you're saying. If it's an emergency, blah, 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 I can do this, right? If it's World War I.
Yes. So the president and his people are defending tariffs by saying, look, we have this International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
Yeah.
It says I could regulate imports. I'm declaring an emergency for whatever reason. It could be the tariffs. It could be fentanyl. And thereby, I'm allowed to do this. The people in court who are against him on this, and this is done, the case was brought actually by small businesses who were affected by the tariffs. They're saying no for a couple different reasons. Number one, Article 1, you can't do this. This is Congress, right? Not only is it Congress, but it's a non-delegable duty of Congress. In other words, Congress is not allowed to delegate their core responsibilities. Congress can't just say, hey, here's a law. The president can now do everything. We do nothing. You're not allowed to do that. So they're not allowed to do
because it's in the Constitution that this is their responsibility.
They can't give up their powers.
Their core. Okay, gotcha.
So they're not allowed to do that. So that's the main crux of their argument. The other one is this International Emergency Economic Powers Act, right? It says regulate imports. Does that mean tariffs? I mean, does it? I don't know. So the argument against it is they're saying that, I think we discussed this in older cases, the major questions doctrine. So the major questions doctrine is in essence saying if a statute is vague on something
Mhm.
and it's a major, major question like this, we're not going to assume Congress meant that. So in essence, what that argument is it doesn't say tariffs in the statute. If Congress meant to include tariffs, it would have been in there. It's vague, and because it's vague, we're not going to allow it because it's such a major question. The major questions doctrine.
Well, and I was hearing other podcasts that are specific about constitutional law or whatever, that, the courts generally give a wide when there's vagueness in the law, they give a lot of latitude to who's ever in charge, president, whatever, right? Is that true here?
No, it's kind of the opposite.
Okay.
It's sort of, yeah. So it's basically saying if it's a major question and Congress was not specific, then they're not going to allow it.
Okay.
So, it's interesting, the judge in their oral argument they had recently, it seemed like the majority of the judges were kind of leaning towards not allowing the tariffs. Most of them were questions against the government, against the administration, saying, well, where'd you get this? Do you think another president can come in and say, hey, global warming is a national emergency, thereby I'm going to charge 30% tariffs on blah, blah, blah. Where do you draw the line? So I felt like with the oral arguments, most of the justices were inclined to knock it down. However, here's the problem. Now we have practicality.
Mm-hmm.
Has collected an enormous amount of money from these tariffs. If they knock down the right of the president to collect these tariffs, what happens to the money? Where does it go? So, now we get into, well, there's the law and there's what's practical. So they have to figure out how to do this. Do they want to just follow what they seem to indicate as the law and say, president can't do that? Will they try to find like a middle ground and maybe say, okay, they can't do it going forward, which is kind of strange because you're saying something that wasn't allowed, but you're allowing it to go through. So it gets a little tricky. And this is where, Justice Roberts, who brings people together, he's the guy who, helps forge coalitions, has to bring enough people together to come up with a plan here that, yes, will knock down the right to tariff without Congress, but at the same time, follow the law. And, and follow the law, but also make it so it doesn't do anything drastic to our economy. So that's the tricky part.
Well, and if what he did was struck down, I mean, one of the things that people talk about is, well, what are we going to do? I mean, give people a refund? Where does that money come from? And the thing is, the effects of the tariffs affect us as personal consumers because the people who have incoming tariff products, they compensate by raising the prices on us.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to get a refund, are we? I'm not going to get a refund from, French wine or, a t-shirt like this one, a t-shirt that was made in South Korea or something. So am I?
I mean, who knows? I mean, if they could find a creative way to find this not constitutional, not legitimate, but maybe kick it back to Congress or something, I have a feeling they're going to do certain things that are a little bit tricky here to try a practical way to solve it. It sounds like the majority there aren't supportive of the tariffs. They don't think it's legitimate. They don't think it's illegal.
Okay.
They don't think that it applies in this case. That's just, look, you never know what happens once they vote. But that's the impression that we're getting from these arguments. They may try to come up with a way to make it so, who knows, Congress gets to decide, the money gets returned somehow. I don't know how they would do it, but there's a pretty good chance they're going to say no. And then what happens then? Anybody's guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I would really hope so, because I feel like it's a little bit ridiculous. I mean, like David, this case was heard before Trump began using tariffs to punish countries who didn't do pretty much what he likes. Like, so for example, he was threatening to tariff many of our NATO allies because they supported Denmark in wanting to keep Greenland part of their kingdom. So it's like, is that even different? You know what I mean?
Oh, this week that was going on with this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
Yeah.
we're talking about stuff like hour to hour is changing.
Oh,
But
Exactly.
but I mean, she makes an amazing point. I mean, can he do that? Can he weaponize terrorists?
Well, that's why we have this discussion. That's why we have this.
I'm sending this podcast right to John Roberts.
But I'll tell you what. Here's why I think there's a chance. It's a good chance it gets knocked out.
Okay.
Justice Gorsuch was really questioning this at an oral argument. He didn't seem to agree. He seemed to be against the administration on this. So there wasn't too much support. I think Justice Thomas, who typically almost every time sides with the administration, he thought emergency power. It's an emergency. The president needs to have the authority to handle this. The argument was foreign policy, emergencies. There are arguments on the other side, which is emergencies happen, and the president needs to have these tools in the case of an emergency to help our country in emergency situations. So, and yes, like you mentioned, other presidents have done it to some extent. I think if he did like a 10% tariff for 6 months with whatever Syria, I don't think it would have been a big deal. But I think because they're in essence permanent,
Yeah.
they're widespread. I think that's why even the conservatives on the court seem to be somewhat skeptical of this. And yeah, it sounds like it's going to be knocked down, but the question is how and what.
And when?
Yeah, so it's and then we have I'm not going to get into it could be a constitutional crisis. Yeah, I mean, what if the administration says no? So there's just can they? No, but who knows, right?
Well, there was the famous case during the Andrew Jackson presidency where they were trying to get all the Cherokee Indians out of Georgia, and this is back in the early 19th century, and the Supreme Court, and the Cherokee Indians were very, very savvy in terms of having lawyers and sort of being assimilated into the normal culture. And it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled on behalf of the Cherokee Indians, and they said, no, you can't forcibly move the Cherokee Indians because they had given, 100 years ago or 75 years ago, we had given Georgia or big chunks of Georgia to them as part of a reservation agreement. And now we're reneging on it and trying to move them off because somebody discovered gold on that particular thing. And then Andrew Jackson said, hey, Supreme Court, fuck you. I've got an army. You don't. Come and get me. And he basically just did whatever he wanted and nobody could stop him. Right. And Andrew Jackson, by the way, is Trump's favorite president. He removed the giant painting of Abraham Lincoln in the Oval Office and put Andrew Jackson there.
And that's the problem. So, and there's been some quotes. I don't know if it was Vice President Vance, but someone said something similar last year, a couple years ago. Try to enforce it, Justice Roberts, something to that effect. So, look, we've been a republic for a long time. Constitution has worked, and my guess is this will work out. You know what I mean? And I don't think they'll go there. I don't think they will do that. There's been rumblings and threats and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think they will listen to the Supreme Court on this.
Okay, David.
Let's hope.
I hope you're fucking right.
Our country has endured.
No one wants to be in a car or a motorcycle accident or a slip and fall that causes physical or mental damage, and even construction accidents are on the rise today. But if you or a friend or family member are injured, you need a professional and understanding law firm that has experience in getting the most for their clients' injuries. And you can find all of that at the law firm of Grover, and Fensterstock. They are a premier personal injury firm located in New York City, and their track record is excellent. They have years of experience working and winning for their clients. Now, they offer a free consultation, and they only get paid when you get paid. So how do you get in touch with them? Well, you call David Grover at 1-866-99-LAWYER and mention that you were referred by the Scandal Sheet podcast, one of your favorite podcasts, of course. So David Grover at Grover and Fensterstock, 1-866-99-LAWYER, 866-99-LAWYER. You'll be glad you called.
So what's next, Bernice?
West Virginia versus BPJ. BPJ is a transgender girl who has lived and competed as a girl since elementary school and, after receiving puberty blockers and estrogen, sought to continue participating on her school's girls' cross-country and track teams. West Virginia's 2021 Save Women's Sports Act, which bars students identified as male at birth from girls' teams, prevented her from doing so. BPJ, through her mother, sued state and education officials, alleging violations of the Equal Protection Clause in Title IX. Does Title IX or the Equal Protection Clause prohibit a state from assigning students to girls' and boys' sports teams based on their biological sex as determined at birth? This case was only heard days ago, but court watchers unanimously believe this will be a 6-3 decision favoring West Virginia.
So the transgender case, while it may not have the same issue with our daily lives as the tariff case, I think it's something that people get emotionally involved in. So it does get out there. So essentially, two young women sued in their respective states. They are transgender women to play in
which for our audience, transgender means they were formerly male. They were born male, identified as male biologically, and then at some point they became they transitioned to female. Is that the correct definition?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Chester, Idaho. Now, I should add a little fact pattern to this as well, which is these two transgender women, these athletes, actually took medication when they were younger, so they never actually went through puberty.
Oh, really?
So
because they were so they knew they were not the right gender even before 12 or 13.
Yeah. So now this gets this, we'll talk about this later, and there was some surprise questions in the argument about this from the conservative side again. So their argument is essentially, look, equal protection under the law. Title IX, discrimination, and that was really their argument to this case. And from a practical standpoint, their argument is, well, we don't have any athletic advantage to the young women who were born female because we never went through puberty as a male. So is
that empirically and observably true that they have no advantage?
It's a scientific question, and I'm not sure. I mean, I've read things like that, but I'm not sure how, if it's a proven fact. So, the states who are defending their laws are saying, sure, Title IX, it was 1972, right? However, in 1974...
No, we should probably... Title IX says that women should have equal access to sports, and that's why we have,
discrimination.
Separate women's teams and men's teams. Is that true?
Yeah, discrimination. It's all about discrimination.
It's okay. Anti-discrimination, right?
Yeah, anti-discrimination.
Okay.
Now, 2 years later, there was something called the Javits Amendment, sponsored by, and I don't know if you know who Jacob Javits was, senator from New York. Have you ever heard of the Javits Center?
No, I'm going to look it up now. I think I missed that. Sorry.
The very, very big convention center in New York City.
Okay.
Anytime there's an event, a convention, it's done in the Javits Center. So Jacob Javits had an amendment that passed Congress that said, yes, discrimination, bad. However, with sports, it's going to be a little different. There's going to be a little bit nuance with sports. And I think, my reading of it is, for example, I don't know if you're a college football fan, but Indiana won the national championship the other day, right? On Monday night, I think.
Right. Sunday? Monday? Okay.
Great game. And I think what this amendment was basically saying was people in Indiana University can't come out and say, you know something, we also want a girls' football team,
Oh, really?
women's football team.
Oh,
They're
that's
basically
interesting.
saying it's not going to be as simple if young men get it, also young women get it. And consider certain things, finances, equipment, interests, fans. So I think that amendment came out and said, you know, in sports, it's a little different, right? So that's kind of where I think the people are trying to keep these statutes and keep them from playing in women's sports are saying. They're basically saying, no, well, it does say right there in that amendment that sports can be a factor. Now, the justices seem to be leaning towards keeping these statutes and not letting these young women play, which, by the way, a lot of it's moot already. A lot of these people are older. They're not playing in sports anymore. These things take years to go through the court system. But they're basically leaning towards making the decision. Now, it's funny. Gorsuch, again, Justice Gorsuch, conservative justice, brought up what I brought up earlier, which is, well, it's interesting. These young women never actually went through male puberty, so maybe they don't have any advantages, and maybe this is something that could be litigated in the lower courts. Do they actually have an advantage? Like you asked me before, do they have one? Well, Rich is basically saying maybe the lower courts could look into this. He seemed a little sympathetic to these athletes.
So it's a case-by-case basis as opposed to some giant blanket ruling on all human beings.
No, that's what Gorsuch was implying. I don't know if that's going to happen. So I think, you know, the concern here or the issue here is, and Mike, knowing this court, are they going to just rule on transgender in sports?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they going to make a much broader decision on transgender in general? You know, there's been different decisions over the years, and, you know, about minors getting treatment and banned, and they held that up. There was other cases that came down that said they can't be discriminated against. So will the court do something broad and bigger?
Yeah, there's almost like sort of a cottage industry of you know, the bathroom issues, and like you say, you know, can you use your health insurance for transition surgery? Does that count?
Yeah.
Or is that cosmetic surgery, like getting a boob job or something? So
No, yes.
So,
well, you know, I don't think they're going to go that big.
Okay.
Because not only did you have Gorsuch say that, but Kavanaugh seemed to also indicate that he wasn't so big on. It sounds like Kavanaugh wanted to make it a state by state issue. He didn't want to overrule the 20-something states that allow transgender women to play in women's sports. So it sounds like they don't want to make these a big broad stroke. And if you know Justice Roberts, it kind of sounds like something he'd like to avoid. And I think when in doubt, the swing votes in the Supreme Court, they tend to want to push things to the state. They don't want to make these broad proclamations. They want to say, all right, you know, states, you guys decide. So that's kind of like, if you listen to the argument, it sounds like kind of the route they're going on this. They're probably going to uphold it, and they're probably going to just limit it to sports.
Hello, Scandal Sheeters. I'm one of your hosts, Anuradha. I want to ask you a personal favor. We recently launched on Patreon. Patreon is a platform where you can help support artists like us for as little as the price of one Starbucks coffee per month. It's really cool because as a Scandal Sheet subscriber, we can provide you with exclusive bonus content like uncut versions of episodes, transcripts, and bonus episodes. And you get to know Thad and I on a more personal level and stay tuned with all our antics. It's super easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/Scandal Sheet and sign up. It takes only seconds. Patreon is spelled Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Scandal Sheet. You'd really be doing me a favor because Thad owes me money, freaking deadbeat. Thank you, wonderful scandal sheeters. Now on with our show. Well, I thought it was interesting because, like, I do feel like it is kind of cutting across party lines. So we talked about, Gorsuch, who's very conservative, having sympathy, right? But from the very left-leaning folks, they're actually uncomfortable with the idea that former boys, now transition girls, are competing against biologically born girls in collegiate sports. So it's interesting how they're kind of like switching a little bit. Not everyone, but some folks.
Yeah, and Justice Barrett, Comey Barrett, said something interesting to the effect of, well, and she was talking about against the equal protection in this case, and said, yeah, but is this going to be used for boys who aren't that great at sports and maybe they want to play in the girls' team? Like, she brought up some more practical, maybe to overrule equal protection, because now, what about the protection of the girls, born girls who play in the sports? So, there's someone. It's more like a red meat thing for different groups of people. It's not going to affect a lot of people, but it's going to get a lot of press and a lot of media attention. But it sounds like there's going to be some decision that does uphold these state statutes that do not allow these transgender young women to play in female sports. I think
and I agree with you, David, on sort of your skepticism that, unlike, abortion or gun control or whatever, this particular issue doesn't affect 100 million people, right? It's sort of a narrow kind of a thing because, not everybody is in this gender confusion issue, at a young age or whatever. However, it does seem significant in the fact that it goes back to what are the powers of government, whether it's federal or state, over us. What can they tell us to do? I mean, wasn't the whole idea of the Constitution is like the 10th and 9th Amendment is like any powers that are not specifically granted to the federal government or the state governments belong to the people, right? They don't belong to the government. The government can't insert itself. This is Nazi Germany, right?
Well, get remember, it's also under Title IX. It involves any entity that's funded with federal dollars.
Okay, that's where it comes in. Okay,
that's how they're allowed to do it. And by the way, these are also state statutes. So
it does fall under Amendment 9 and 10.
Yeah, and because it's federal funded or they receive some federal money, that they are responsible for Title IX and the Javits Amendment. So, it's going to be a big decision when it comes down. It may not affect a lot of people, but it's going to be a big decision. It's going to be a rallying cry, I think, for a lot of people. But I think most likely they will, to some extent, uphold these statutes. And who knows? Do they throw something else in there? Does Gorsuch get, I might say his way, but something he was alluding to about should there be some exception for transgender girls who never want through puberty?
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to get a priority, but it might be out there. Or maybe he'll do a concurring opinion of some sort.
I didn't put this in the rundown, but just talking about this episode when I said, "Oh yeah, we're doing," because episodes with David doing the Supreme Court are very popular. So friends, colleagues, or whatever, they're like, "Oh, you're doing something with David," and I said, "Yeah, we're doing that Supreme Court case that was argued last Thursday, literally 6 days ago," and and I said, "Hey, by the way, do you know any transgender people?" And I thought I had a diverse group of friends, and nobody actually knows anybody. I knew people in high school and college who probably, I'm guessing, went that way, even though nobody used the word transgender back in the 80s or whatever. I don't know. Do you guys know a lot of I mean, you live in New York City, David, one of the most diverse freaking metropolitan areas on planet Earth. Do you have a lot of transgender clients?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
And even in terms of people I know, I have friends, kids but I don't think they actually transition. They might lean that way, but maybe they will one day. But I don't think they've actually done that. I've
Are they
seen.
just influenced by sort of the wave of things, especially the way young people are, where the way they dress or the music that they listen to? Do they think I'm transgender just because it sounds
Well,
cool
what
at
it
the
is,
moment?
some of these kids I know, I guess not really kids anymore, the young adults, but they go by they.
Mm,
They
Yeah, yeah.
right.
they dress they were born female and they dress like boys. Maybe they use a boy type of name. I don't think they had any procedures done or anything like that. But
But they're
so
non-binary or whatever, or
yeah,
Yeah.
they're
like that.
Yeah.
genderless, kind of.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
but like you said, it's not that widespread. You know,
Although a
maybe
lot of people, like in business, a lot of people now, in their email signature when they send you an email or whatever, have in their pronouns
Yeah,
he,
like they them or
she,
she did that type of thing.
they, or
Yeah.
what, they tell you, like, as it's almost like in LinkedIn, your LinkedIn profile, they sort of expect you to
I mean,
announce the pronouns that you prefer.
it might be
So,
different. I don't know what's going to happen. Look, I tell people the story. I tell my kids. I said, I went to high school. I graduated, I think, with 550 people.
hmm,
Do you know how many outward homosexual gay people were in my class?
I have no idea.
Zero. None. Zero.
Are you
Okay.
sure? How do you know that?
No, out. That were out. That were out.
Oh,
Not,
there were
yeah.
zero that were out. Okay, there could have been
That's crazy.
non-outs, right?
I mean, now I know a few that maybe are. But my point is, back then, nobody came out, or most people didn't come out back then.
Yeah.
So 550 people.
Because you were graduating in the 90s, the early
late.
80s?
So,
okay.
however, my kids, when they went to school, they know a lot because it's something that people, especially young people, are able to come out and not have too much fear to come out this way. So I guess my point is maybe years from now it'll be similar to this. I don't know. Um, right now it seems like no, but society changes sometimes and things become accepted. Think about when the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was a constitutional right.
Yeah, that was during the Obama administration, and that was a conservative court, right?
A big deal.
Yeah,
big
it was
deal.
a big
Yeah.
deal. Yeah.
Now, like, oh really? I mean, it just doesn't. You so used to it these days. It becomes part of our society that you don't really think of it anymore as a big
Well,
deal.
I think it's like interesting because sometimes the question is like raised that, back in the day, right, people weren't really coming out. A lot of people are coming out now. Is it, and not necessarily coming out as like gay, but coming out like, hey, I don't, identify as male or female. I'm this, or,
Yeah.
so they're talking a lot about that now. So what does it mean? Does it mean, some people ask, like, does it mean like people are just more aware of it? So now they're like, oh, hey, yeah, maybe that's me. Or is it media influencing things where people are like, oh, you know what? I don't feel good. Maybe I'm this, or, I'm not happy with myself. Maybe I should do this. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always like a question because I know that, obviously I have a lot of, folks that have had kids around me, that kind of thing. And in schools, it's crazy because there are a lot of teachers that are now getting training in identifying and being able to talk to parents if they think that like if the kid thinks that they are born in the wrong body, which is so crazy. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, and that kind of, maybe that's maybe another episode, but that kind of begs the question, like, is that okay? You know what I mean? Where like the teachers are going to the parents and being like, hey, you should really start to help your kid transition because they're not, you know what I mean? It's crazy. It can go in so many different directions. And then it's
It-
like, are you supportive? Are you being supportive, or are you hurting the child? Right? What does the child really know at the age of 9 or 10? You know what I mean?
you're
It's
definitely an episode because that's a tricky question.
It's crazy. It can really go in
And that's what a
very
lot of
many
these
different
laws
directions.
in more conservative states are coming from, where they're trying to prevent sort of the nominal encouragement of
Yeah.
people transitioning, by the very existence of a program where there's a brochure or there's a poster on the wall in the school or whatever. Oh, are you male? Are you female? Do you know? We'll help you out. And using state dollars, federal dollars, insurance dollars, whatever. And that that is just fueling this whole thing. And at least in my experience back, when I was in college in the 80s, when I was going to film school, performing arts program, also doing a lot of theater and stuff like that. And a lot of my fellow students were openly gay, unashamedly. And I guess you could argue that the performing arts world is very opening to
A little more
people
open,
of,
yeah.
different orientation stuff. The thing was, I was actually very straight and actually a total nerd. Blue jeans, white Oxford shirt. They would call me, "Hey, Thad's our token straight guy." So, but I got along with everybody. I was fine. I love these guys.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was totally not like, whatever the cliche TV shows, Grace and whatever, where the
Grace?
gay guy is, the gay guy is always, just like a flip wrist crazy person. You could not tell somebody was gay. I couldn't, at least. A woman or a man was gay, except for the fact, if you're at a party and everybody's getting, a little wasted, then you could see where everybody's hooking up with, okay, now I know. But otherwise you didn't know. And no one ever messed with me and tried to convert me, to bisexuality or anything. So, I had to look at go to the business school if I wanted a straight girl. But, and there was all this stuff among like evangelical Christians where they were like, okay, we can convert you back. You think you're gay? We can convert you back. We got this program. We're going to convert you back. And now, now it's whatever, 40 years later, I'm thinking, wow, this thing feels like the same thing. Like you said, David, there was whatever 15 years ago, where they legalized or essentially legalized gay marriage. And now everybody's attention is turned to this transgender question. And I don't know.
It's probably going to become, like most things, it'll become more normalized over the years. It's not, and one day it'll be not a big deal, I guess.
Yeah.
There's always going to be some resistance to these things. More so than, it's also a political hot. It's an issue with elections, politics. In the presidential election, they were using things like they're for they, we're for you, or something like that. The implication. So it's gonna be a hot issue for a while. But look, I think it helped them that you had Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, that one really kind of threw me for a loop when I first.
And that's another thing, right? Because like Bruce Jenner, so when Bruce Jenner transitioned, and she came out and was like pushing folks and like, yeah, you can do it, I support you. Some people who were transitioning or they were about to transition were actually really annoyed and angry, and they're like, that hasn't been our experience. That's your experience because you're an athlete, you're a famous Olympian. Like, don't say that is everyone's experience, because it's not. You know what I mean? Because to be honest, her transition was, I know there were some people who were so used to seeing Bruce and they viewed Bruce as like Bruce. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait, what the hell? So I know that there are some folks, but her transition was actually pretty well accepted for the most part. Right? Like, Kris Jenner, folks that were really badly impacted by her transitioning, they ended up just really loving and accepting her, and that hasn't been really everyone's case. I've seen folks that I went to school with that transitioned, and it's so interesting because I feel like even though it all sits in the LGBTQA umbrella.
At this point, David dropped off the session due to technical issues, but Anuradha and Thad continued.
So I kind of actually view it separately from like people that are gay and like people that are transgender, just because like I don't know, I just feel like sometimes and you know and to each their own, right? But I just feel like sometimes when I've spoken, and I haven't spoken to a lot, but when I've spoken to one or two transgender people or read interviews, right? They almost want to kill their previous life. Like they're like, no, that wasn't me. You know what I mean? Like they don't really want to look back at when they were the other like when they were their gender they were born in. You know, so I just find that that's very interesting, because I feel like, you know, gay people are just, they're not, you know, they're not really like, I don't know, they're more kind of accepting about how they were before they realize like, okay, yeah, I'm gay. You know what I mean? So I just feel like it's just a very interesting thing. Now, to be fair, these two women athletes, they knew early on, they started transitioning way before, you know,
They were very
puberty.
young. They were like in elementary
Yeah,
school or
like,
junior high school, yeah.
so I just feel like, I do feel like this is something that needs to be a case by case basis, right? Like they did hit it before puberty happened. They were going through the full transition. Like it's not just like they're male and then they're like, no, I want to play on this, and then they haven't done any of the work. You know what I mean? Like these two women were already going through the process. They were changing themselves. So to like, you know, and they started very early on before puberty to change themselves. So to deny them, I don't necessarily agree with that personally, you know. So I don't know. I feel like this needs to be something that's case by case, but maybe that's just me.
Well, David Grover, thank you very much. Of Grover and Fensterstock, thank you very much for coming with us today. And our audience is going to love you, David. Thank you very much.
Woo! Thank you.
Please follow or subscribe to Scandal Sheet on your favorite pod platform and share it with all your friends. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a shameless, over-the-top rave review on Apple Podcasts especially. That helps us build audience. And we would really appreciate it if you could support us on Patreon, where you can enjoy premium bonus content for less than the price of a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Just go to patreon.com/scandalsheet. Also, we want to hear from you. You can reach us online at Facebook or X, formerly Twitter, LinkedIn, or TikTok. Or just send us an email to scandalsheetpod@gmail.com. See you next time on Scandal Sheet!